Welcome. I'm Ron Baker. I'm the director of the Canadian Small Church Ministry Centre, which is affiliated with Small Church Connections here in Canada. I look forward to each time that I have this podcast, I look forward to it. This is us, Canadian Small Churches in Action podcast. And today we have two special guests with us. They're both Army people, Salvation Army, and we're looking forward to finding out a little bit about them and what they've been about in their own ministry. And so I'm going to start off just by asking them to tell me their names and some of their ministry journey. You'll see that we've got both of them that are there. Oh, well, we'll find out all sorts of stuff. So let's start off just by letting whoever wants to jump in first, either Mike or Karen, one or the other, take it away.
Well, my name is Mike Puddicombe. Been a Salvation Army officer for 25 years. And prior to that, we were youth pastors with the Salvation Army. So we've been in full-time ministry, in church ministry for 30 years now. So
where did you start off?
It's been a long journey. Started off in Victoria, BC.
Oh, yeah,
as youth
beautiful.
pastors, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And moved from there to Richmond, BC. Then we went to our seminary, training college in Toronto for 2 years. And then that's when we were ordained as Salvation Army officers and started our moving around the country. So we started off in Yellowknife.
Oh, really?
Actually, and yeah, we did a year in Yellowknife before moving to St. Albert, Alberta.
Yeah.
And from there, we moved to Niagara Falls, Ontario, planted a church in Niagara Falls. And we were there for 11 years.
Oh.
And so it's been, that was a real important time for our family as well, because all of our kids got to finish high school and stuff in Niagara Falls. But then we went to Thunder Bay, Ontario, and then followed by Orangeville, Ontario, and now we're in Burlington.
Nice.
And we've been since our time in Niagara Falls, we've been almost solely involved in either church planting or church revitalization.
Oh, excellent.
So they send us into the places to sort of jumpstart. Yeah.
I've got some great questions, just personal questions and other questions about church revitalization. Okay, Karen, we sort of ran on there, and tell me a little bit about, you've been part of this for how many years now? 30, 40? No, sorry.
30, yeah.
30. All right. So you guys started off and just jumped right in. Hit a place like Yellowknife.
Yeah, in the Salvation Army in general, yeah. As officers, in Salvation Army, you're both ordained at this. Well, for us, it was at the same time. So,
okay.
So we went into seminary as a family. So then we were at the same time.
Okay. One of the questions I was going to say is, I used to have relatives up in Yellowknife by the name of the Dyses. And Glenn but anyways, and then Niagara Falls is close enough to Smithville, Grimsby, and all that sort of area, which is where my mother came from. So where did you originally come from?
Myself?
Yourself.
Most of my life, I grew up in Sherwood Park, Alberta, a very small hamlet just outside of Edmonton. So I spent most of my childhood in Alberta, and then moved to Winnipeg. That's where Mike and I met, was when we moved to Winnipeg years ago.
So in Sherwood Park, were you part of a Salvation Army corps there?
No, we went to local churches. There's not a Salvation Army in Sherwood Park. So we went to like a local church growing up. I think it was a United Church, if I'm not mistaken. And it was just in my teen years, after my father passed away when I was young. And so in my teen years, we returned to the Salvation Army and in Edmonton and started going to the church there.
Oh, okay. And so, and Mike, you've been part of the Salvation Army for a number of years as well, eh?
Yeah, in Winnipeg. Back in the day, in the 70s, they used to have a lot of bus ministry.
Mhm.
They go around with the big bus, pick up kids, and they came and picked up my family.
Yeah.
And so carted us off to Sunday school, and we just kept going. So
Yeah.
yeah, all those years later, I think it was 19, I think I started around 1975, 76, somewhere in there, when I was just young. And our family just, now we've always been. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, I'm going to jump to some other questions here, but this is very interesting. Just I hear a number of things in my own background, and I'm currently working with a church in an interim pastor position coming in, and revitalization is something every church needs. So I'm going to ask you a little bit about that later. But first, let me back you up. You were recently in Orangeville. You did some pretty creative things there, I understand, in ministry. Karen, can you sort of throw out one or two of those?
Yeah, so the community there, the church was a great church and was very active to some degree within the community, but it just wasn't fully inclusive.
Mhm.
And so it was just trying to find ways and ministries in order to connect the family with the church. And so we did things like a huge Easter celebration and had like 150 families come in and be part of that. We changed like meal when they would do like a Christmas dinner, went from being for the church to now it's for the entire community. So it made the events much larger, but it was very intentional at connecting with the community, not being a separate entity, that we became part of community.
Yeah. And that whole moving from the inward to the outward seems to be a big part of revitalization. Would you say that?
I would,
Critical part.
yes,
Yeah.
definitely.
A critical part. Okay.
Critical part.
But-
And really, in the revitalization that we did in Orangeville, that was just, they didn't have, they weren't a dying church. They were fairly, they were fairly active. That was a younger people. But they just sort of, they just needed that little tweaking.
Yeah.
Of not being so much inward, but now we have to continue focusing outward. And so that's really, that was really what we focus on in our time there, was just getting them to think outside themselves again and to think bigger. And that really, the people caught on very, very quickly with that.
Okay.
It was a fairly easy process as far as that was concerned. But still having that sense that it's very comfortable just to, you just know the people and
Oh yeah.
and we have our spot that we sit on Sundays, and never seeing new people come in. So when that starts to change, when that dynamic changes, people have to be ready for that. So that there's a little bit of teaching involved there. Will be people coming. How are we going to respond when they start coming? So
yeah, and that's a difficult thing if people aren't willing to do that, or have become family oriented, or whatever term we use nowadays. How did you break that? We're family that wants more family, instead of we're just family that's comfortable.
It's a lot of teaching. A lot of it comes from the pulpit. That would be one of the main reasons, or one of the main ways. The other way was through small group studies. Karen had an excellent ministry with women in the church, and them learning all about that. Wouldn't you say, Karen, was a big part of it as well?
Yeah, because the women's ministry aspect connected with the community. So it was families in the congregation who could invite friends, neighbors, daughters, granddaughters, great-granddaughters to come to activities that's specific for women.
Yeah.
So we grew a pretty large crowd into women's ministry. So, went from there being, 6 or 7 people coming to, within those 3 years, 40 people coming, 45.
Oh, really?
People.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Orangeville is, I used to think of it as rural many years ago when I'd visit relatives there. What would you say? It's a larger center now? 40,000
Yeah, it's the reason why it is like that. It's a hub, right? People
Yeah.
from the county, that is the hub. So the hospital and everything else happens in Orangeville. So so there tend to be a little, and it's more bedroom community to Toronto even, right? It's not that far away. So so you do have that that influx of new families. And in recent years, a lot of immigrant families
Yeah.
moving into the area. That was that was a different dynamic for a lot of people in Orangeville, because they never saw that like you would in some of the larger centers, where people from other countries moving in. They were actually starting to settle in the Dufferin area, Dufferin County, and so that was something new that we had, that everyone was experiencing at the same time. Yeah.
Now, a small church tends to live on relationship. Organization is important, but relationships seem to be the big thing that keep the small church going. Would you say in Orangeville, and particularly in this last little while, as you say, there's an influx, a very diverse population compared to what it would have been. It's still a hub. It's grown, but probably still rural in one sense, that it's a hub area. How well does relationship play into that change of culture that happens? I'll let Karen run away with that one. And by the way, this wasn't on my questions. I asked you, so you have to wing it here, Karen.
Yeah, I think what it is it is becoming aware of what the culture is around us. So what cultures are coming into, how then can we adapt them and connect them to other similar cultures so that they don't feel isolated and alone within their community.
Yeah.
So, an example, we had a beautiful Nigerian family coming. Through one of our outreaches, we had another 2 Nigerian families who came through that, who were newly immigrated to Canada. So we connected the families together and helped them to build those relationships so that there are similarities by coming into a new country. They felt very comfortable in, and were very much a part of that. It took a lot of work because we connected a lot with the region itself. So we did a lot of work because in the Southwestern region, we run a family services, which is a social work, thrift store, and the church. And so it was bringing all 3 units together. We were able to do that by connecting strongly as well with the region, so that they would say, hey, we got this family that's just come from wherever, somewhere in Africa, and I hear you have people that have just immigrated, maybe they could help them out. So there was kind of connections in that way that we really tried to meld and marry families together to support one another.
How did you come about cementing those kind of community connections? Yeah.
So it is a matter of stepping into the community, and instead of always expecting the community to come to you, I had to become very intentional, because that was an area that I worked in. So was to step into the Dufferin County and become part of committees pertaining to homelessness, pertaining to culture, ethnicity, things like that. So became part of those things, so that we could network together. So our strengths could become their strengths could become our strengths as well. So we really became very intentional about how we connect with the community, social service agencies and stuff. So they all knew us, like a short window of time. They knew them by name, they knew us by name. And so you were strongly connected with one another.
Okay. Now you guys have moved to a new community during the pandemic, if I understand correctly. And so how did that work? I mean, I know how much fun it is just without being able to do that relational thing. How did it work?
It was really tough. Not knowing your community is hard when you first come in, but when your community is shut down, and you can't have gatherings, you can't have this chance just to really interact with people socially, that makes it hard. So we didn't even have a chance really to know our own people, which was hard for them, hard for us. Add on to that we couldn't like Karen said, we like getting involved in the community
Yeah.
and finding out what's happening in the community. Um, there wasn't anything like that. We couldn't do that. It wasn't easy just to, for Karen said, to jump into other community groups. She has since done that. But when we first started, that was very, very tough. And I like going to coffee shops and things like that, and becoming part of that little community and getting to know people and finding out about the community that way. And couldn't do that either. So it was, that in itself was very, very tough. It's hard to really get a pulse of your community when you're not able to be in the community. And unfortunately, like a lot of churches, that's not uncommon for them. Like because they're not part of their community, they don't go out into the community. But when you want to be intentional about that and you can't, it makes it that much harder to really make a difference. And just learning about what are the needs in this area, what are people talking about, what's a concern to them, and not being able to have that sort of feedback, you end up guessing, and sometimes you guess right, sometimes you guess wrong. So that's for me, that was the hardest part, just not knowing people.
Well, and the pandemic has been so up and down, and we had here in Saskatchewan restrictions taken off completely, and then all of a sudden restrictions put on, and you're just starting, and then you're not. And how's your emotional intelligence, by the way, at this point? Your health is if you're like me, hospitals are
Yeah.
Okay, Karen and Mike, both. I'd love to hear both of your answers on that.
Yeah, I think there's emotional exhaustion. Like, so you're exhausted. So we didn't stop working. So we worked right through the whole pandemic, and we didn't work from home. So because I run a family services, and that is executive director. And so you don't stop serving people who need food. So it was learning how to navigate and find a balance between what's healthy and wise for my staff, for my volunteers, and what's wise for myself as well. So it was really challenging to keep yourself grounded through that. Just like every other person within the community and in our world, there was days when you were fed up and sick and tired of it. And there was other days you said, okay, I got this. I can keep going. I can keep encouraging people. I can keep, doing what we need to do. I think flexibility was kind of the key. Was we had to be remarkably flexible. And if we were too much within a box, we were never going to survive. So maybe because our nature is to sort of work with outside the box, outside the lines kind of a thing, maybe that didn't seem to be as harmful to us emotionally, but yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at Mike here. So you got anything to add there?
Yeah, a big part of the stressors for me personally, because I deal mainly with the church, and so having to do like a Sunday service where no one else is here, so online stuff, videotaping, doing video editing, and stuff, doing stuff I've never ever done before. That was incredibly taxing. It was, if anything that made me stress out, was every week having to do that, and because it actually took longer to do that than actually just get up on a Sunday and do your thing. So so it would take hours and hours and hours of prep work to do, just to put an hour video together, and then compounded to that for us, our congregation is it's a smaller congregation and elderly, so they don't have, some of them don't even have access to the technology that we were using in order to even see what was happening here, and they couldn't come here to be part of it, and so we were having to find ways in which people could share with each other what was happening, and all of that that really just really just drains you, just like
Yeah.
I can't wait for this to be over so we can, there's going to be a different normal, but at least it'll be somewhat normal.
Yeah.
So
I sure
that
hope so.
was, that itself was, for me, was incredibly taxing.
Now, let me just jump in. You've talked about being involved with church revitalization over the years, and this is a whole different time. How do you see revitalizing a church when you don't even know who they are? And maybe that's not a right question, because yeah, you do learn, but how has this affected that whole area?
That has been incredibly difficult. In that way that you don't know the people. I coached, 4 other congregations through revitalization, and for them it was the same issue.
Oh.
So instead of meeting together to work through things, having to do it on Zoom is not the same, because you just don't have, there's not that energy in the room. There's not, people aren't banging ideas off of each other. So that is incredibly hard. But on the flip side of it, the pandemic actually, if things were done right, actually helps revitalization efforts, because we had to close down so many things. And in a revitalization, you have to really look at what are the areas we're going to concentrate on the most, because most revitalizations they're revitalizing because their numbers have shrunk, and so they just can't do as much as they used to, but they try.
Yeah.
And so with the pandemic and having to shut everything down, it was actually a good time to say, okay, when we open again, what are we going to focus on?
Mm-hmm.
And so in that sense, it was a good thing. But most people, they can't wait to go back to the way things were before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so that can really be an issue.
Yeah, I mean,
when it comes
even this struggle, and maybe it's not so much a struggle. Some people have adapted very well, but we don't print bulletins anymore. And to be quite honest, we've come to the point that we don't have a stand up and walk down the aisle offering time. Right. It's gone. And people, and all of a sudden this whole new normal is, I'm not sure what it's doing to people. And we have the seniors and we have the younger people, but once again, it's made for a whole different church setting and approach. That's for sure. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
What are you finding, Karen?
I agree completely. It is one of those things where we have to really look at things very differently, and even coming together again, we had to sort of look at it even differently than when we came together last year at this time and started services in the church again. And so even as we looked at it this time going through, we had to sort of maybe look a little more further forward than necessarily saying, I have no clue when this is going to end, but we kind of got to a place now where we said, okay, we got to push forward. This is probably going to be our lives moving forward. This is what life is going to be like for a very long time. So then how do we create community? How do we do things so intentional that has purpose and meaning and vision, and it's missionally minded? How do we do that? So it was creating kind of a new normal that would be, in a sense, our new normal, without overtaxing individuals. And I think that was maybe the case for many years, where certain families or certain people, primarily the pastors of the church, did it all. And so we came about saying, we can't do that anymore. Like, that's absolutely unfeasible. I don't even think it's good leadership. So then how do we do that? So how do we, and usually it is, we need less is more, right? Let's do a few things really, really, really well, and be very intentional about those things, and let go of many, many, many other things that have been done for like 20 years, 40 years, 60 years, right? Let's let go of some of those things, gently let go of them, with respect, but also then saying, let's move forward as well.
Okay, now, what kind of person is best suited to work within this kind of a setting, this kind of context? And we're talking about revitalizing churches, or even just helping churches to flourish. What would be some of the attributes? What would that person look like? Who would be, okay, I've asked about 5 questions. If you want to take any one of those, go for it.
Yeah. Most often, people who are revitalizers generally have the same sort of temperament and drive as, say, a church planter.
Okay.
They have to have that type of mindset, because in a sense you are starting something new.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is a big thing. I personally think there's a few things that they revitalizers, all revitalizers should have. They should be full of hope. Like there's this hope that there is a better tomorrow than what we have right now, that we can actually move forward, that there's something that is, you remember our glory days, those can happen even more than they were before.
Yeah.
So it's that sense of hope. They also have to be very courageous people, because revitalization is not easy. And typically not everyone can do it. Not every pastor is trained in that way. Not everyone has that type of temperament, but without the courage to say, no, this is what we're doing, this is how we're going forward, it makes it very, very difficult. So if people who are strictly people pleasers would find it very hard to lead a church revitalization effort. One thing that Karen does very well, that more so than I, is being very caring, because there's a lot of hurt people, and a lot of people will be hurt in the process. So you got to be very, very caring, and come alongside people, and just love them. Just like, not everyone is going to love you. Definitely. If you're a type of person that needs everyone to love you, revitalization is not for you.
It's not, no. Okay.
It's not going to happen. So because change is difficult, and not everyone likes change, and they'll see you as the cause of all their problems.
Yeah.
So that in itself, but to remain caring, to love these people and say, listen, like, you may not love me, but man, I still care about you, and want to be want you to be part of the team.
Yeah. So Karen, I got to get Karen to jump in here, because
because Karen's very good at a lot of these things. So it's we work well together in that sense.
For sure. I think you have to be a team player. Like, you have to create this team of people where you come together and work together. People need to feel kind of an ownership to it. It needs to be theirs. So when you begin kind of the process of revitalization, you want to build a team. Yeah. And so I'd rather have the congregation as my team than saying 2 people in the church agree with us. And it is creating a positive, building a team of people to surround you who are willing to take the risks with you, because there's a lot of risk involved. I think you have to be really good communicators. You need to be able to communicate the challenges that are before you. You need to be able to communicate where the direction that you're heading, to be articulate as to where that is and what that's going to look like, and yet be willing to be flexible, that when it's not working, let's change it and do something else. Revitalization is a process. That is something we have really seen over the years. 3 to 5 years, 5 is even better. For you to really see things happen and changes take place. That doesn't mean you're not doing change from the very beginning, because instantly we've done stuff from the day we arrived, things that were big change already. But you got to be patient, and you're creating a picture, a painting of what the church can be and what God's desires it to be. And so you're empowered to be the church. That church is no longer a building; it's the people who work for the kingdom. Yeah. So that. That those are some of the things that you got to be willing to enter in conflict resolution soon. So we have found that in our ministry is that if you think it's going to go away, it's not going away. So you're much better to kind of hit the nail on the head with the thing sooner than later. Big issues and big problems going on, and talk to those people and affirm in them that, you know, their behavior or conduct or whatever it ends up being is not going to be tolerated. We're not going to put up with it.
Yeah.
And really address those things by packing it away. It resolves nothing and actually causes a lot of a wound to fester within your community, even before you get to take off.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. I hate to say it, but our time's up. So I'm going to say I have a whole bunch more questions. We didn't get through all the questions we had. So maybe sometime later, but for the moment, thank you very, very much. I really appreciate this. So thanks again.
Thanks for having
All
me.
right, take care.
Oh, thank you.
Appreciate it.